The dense forest was silent, but for the occasional rustling of leaves disturbed by the wind. Beneath the shadows of towering trees, a lone figure moved cautiously through the undergrowth. Her fur was blue, a deep, vibrant hue that stood out starkly against the dull green of the forest floor. Her ears twitched as she listened to the sounds around her, but her eyes were filled with doubt. The alien princess, once regarded as a symbol of strength, now wore the heavy burden of exile. Her name was Arya, and she had been cast out of her kingdom. The accusation? Weakness. For years, she had been trained to fight, to rule, and to lead her people with courage. But her failures in battle had shattered that vision. The final blow came when her people were attacked by a ruthless enemy. She had failed them, and they could no longer trust her to protect them. Her heart was heavy as she walked, each step seeming to echo the shame that weighed on her soul. Arya had hoped for a life of honor, a life where she would be praised for her strength and wisdom. Now she was nothing more than a refugee, lost in the wilderness of a foreign world. The wind howled around her, tugging at her blue fur, but she paid it no mind. She had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. As she continued on her path, the familiar sounds of the forest seemed to grow distant. She had walked for hours, unsure of her destination. It was only when she reached a clearing that she saw him. A human, dressed in simple clothes, was kneeling beside a small fire. His eyes locked with hers, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. He was young, perhaps only a few years older than her. His expression was one of surprise, but there was no fear. In fact, his calm demeanor surprised her. She had expected him to flee, or worse, attack her. Instead, he simply smiled and gestured for her to sit by the fire. Arya hesitated for a moment before taking a cautious step forward. "You're far from your people," the human said, his voice soft but filled with curiosity. Arya did not answer immediately. Her mind raced, but she could not bring herself to speak. The shame of her exile hung over her, and she could not shake the feeling that she was unworthy of his kindness. The human seemed to sense her hesitation and spoke again, this time with more assurance. "I know you are lost," he said. "But you are not alone here. You are welcome to stay with me for as long as you need." His words were not those of a warrior or a leader, but of someone who saw beyond the surface, beyond the scars of battle and defeat. It was a kindness Arya had never known. For a moment, she wanted to refuse, to turn away and face her exile alone. But something in his voice made her pause. She realized for the first time in weeks that she did not have to carry this burden alone. She could rest, even if only for a brief moment. She lowered herself to the ground beside the fire, her blue fur catching the light from the flames. As they sat in silence, Arya couldn't help but feel a strange sense of hope rising within her. The human, who had every reason to fear her, had shown her kindness. She didn't understand it, but for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe there was still a chance for her to find her strength again. The fire crackled in the night air, casting dancing shadows on the trees around them. Arya looked into the human's eyes, and for the first time in many years, she saw something she had thought lost: possibility. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Her journey was far from over. The next morning, Arya awoke to the soft sound of birdsong. She blinked slowly, adjusting to the bright light filtering through the trees above. For a moment, she thought it was all a dream, the human, the fire, the comfort, but then she remembered. She was still here, safe, and for the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace. She sat up, rubbing her eyes as she surveyed her surroundings. The clearing was quiet, but not empty. The human was tending to the fire, his back turned as he carefully stoked the flames. His presence was calm and reassuring, a stark contrast to the chaos she had known in her past life. "Good morning," he said without turning around, as though he had known she was awake. Arya blinked, surprised by how easily he had picked up on her movement. There was something comforting in his quiet awareness. "I made breakfast," he added, gesturing to a small pile of fruits and roasted meat on a rock nearby. "I hope it's to your liking." Arya hesitated for a moment before standing. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell of the food reached her. Her stomach growled softly, and she took a cautious step toward the food. As she reached for a piece of fruit, she couldn't help but notice how the human watched her with kind eyes, no judgment, no fear, just a simple kindness she wasn't used to. "Thank you," she said quietly, taking a bite. It tasted sweet, far better than anything she had eaten in weeks. She hadn't realized how much she had missed such simple comforts. The human's generosity seemed to have no end, and for that, she felt a strange sense of gratitude building inside her. The human, noticing her silence, spoke again. "You know, I've been thinking. You don't have to stay here forever. If you want, I can teach you how to defend yourself. I've been traveling for a long time, learning new ways to fight. Maybe we can help each other." His offer was casual, but it struck Arya deeply. She had spent her entire life being trained to fight, yet she had never truly mastered the skills needed to protect herself or her people. Now she was in exile, a broken warrior, unfit for anything. She looked at him confused. "But I failed," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I was too weak. I couldn't protect my people. What good am I now?" The human paused, turning to face her fully. His eyes were steady, unwavering. "You were never weak," he said firmly. "You were just never shown the right way. Strength isn't just about fighting or winning battles. It's about learning from your failures and rising up again. You've already survived more than most. That's strength in itself." His words hit Arya like a wave, washing over her, pulling her into a tide of emotion. She had always believed that strength was only defined by victory, by the battles won. But what if there was another way? What if true strength lay in rising from the ashes of failure? Could she too rise again? "Come," the human said, standing up and offering her his hand. "I'll show you what I've learned. You can be more than just a princess or a warrior. You can be something greater." Arya stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Her heart beat faster, a mixture of fear and hope bubbling inside her. This human, a stranger, was offering her a chance to become something she had never dared imagine. She took a deep breath, her fingers brushing against his, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: determination. They spent the rest of the day training together. The human taught her basic techniques, how to move swiftly, how to use the environment to her advantage, and how to defend herself without relying solely on brute strength. Arya was slow at first, her movements clumsy and unrefined. But the human was patient, guiding her through each step, helping her build confidence with every correction. By the time the sun began to set, Arya was exhausted but oddly satisfied. She had never imagined that training could feel so different, so empowering. She had always trained to please others, to fulfill the expectations placed on her. Now for the first time, she was training for herself. As the night fell and they sat together by the fire again, Arya looked at the human, her mind filled with questions. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with curiosity. "You barely know me. Why would you offer me a chance to change?" The human smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "Because everyone deserves a second chance," he said simply. "And I believe in your strength. You may not see it yet, but it's there. I'm just here to help you find it." Arya stared into the fire, her heart pounding. His words, simple as they were, filled her with a sense of purpose she had long since forgotten. Could she really find the strength to rise again? Could she truly become the warrior she had always wanted to be? For the first time in a long time, Arya felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't just a broken princess anymore. She was something More. She was learning, growing, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The days passed in a blur of training and growth. Arya's movements became smoother, her confidence growing with each passing day. The human, who had become her mentor, was patient and unwavering. Each morning, he taught her something new: how to read the land, how to anticipate an enemy's movements, and how to trust her instincts. Slowly but surely, she was becoming something she had never thought possible: a warrior. One afternoon, after several weeks of intense training, the human asked her to spar. Arya felt a knot of nervousness tighten in her stomach, but she hid it behind a calm mask. She had never fought for herself, always fighting to protect others or to prove her worth. But now she was fighting for herself for the first time in years. She was in control of her own fate. The human stepped back, raising his arms in a defensive stance. "Show me what you've learned," he said, his tone steady but filled with anticipation. "You don't have to hold back." Arya nodded, her blue fur bristling slightly with the excitement of the challenge. She lunged forward, her claws drawn, but the human was quick. He sidestepped her attack with ease and countered with a move that sent her stumbling back. Arya was momentarily stunned by the speed of his movements, but she quickly regained her balance and prepared for another attack. For hours, they fought. Each time Arya struck, the human anticipated her moves, blocking and redirecting her attacks with skill and precision. But Arya was not discouraged. She felt the strength within her, a strength that had been buried beneath layers of doubt and fear. With each strike, she grew more determined, more confident in her abilities. She was no longer the fragile princess who had been exiled for her weakness. She was becoming something stronger. Finally, as the sun began to set, Arya managed to land a blow. It was small, but it was enough. The human stumbled back, his eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, there was silence between them. Then, he grinned, clearly impressed. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You're ready." Arya stood there, panting, her heart pounding with excitement. She had done it. She had proven to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever believed. She was not weak, not anymore. She was strong, and she had the power to protect herself and those she cared for. Ready for what? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The human's smile softened, and he walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Ready to take back what's yours," he said. "You're no longer just an exile. You're a warrior now, Arya, and it's time to reclaim your destiny." Arya's heart skipped a beat. She had never allowed herself to think about returning to her kingdom. The memories of her failure were too fresh, too painful. But now, with this new sense of strength, the thought didn't seem as impossible. She had been cast out, but she could fight for a place where she truly belonged. She could rise again. "I've trained you as best I can," the human continued. "But there's still much more to learn. You'll face challenges, and there will be times when you feel like giving up. But remember, this strength is not measured by how many battles you win. It's measured by your ability to keep going when everything seems lost." Arya nodded, her expression serious. The weight of his words settled deep within her. She had failed before, but she wouldn't fail again. This time, she was ready to face whatever came her way. That night, as the two of them sat by the fire, the forest around them seemed to hum with energy. Arya felt it deep within her, the feeling of something awakening, something she had thought lost. She looked at the human, who had become more than just a mentor to her. He had become a friend, someone who believed in her when no one else did. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice full of gratitude. "For everything." The human smiled again, his eyes filled with understanding. "You did the hard part," he replied. "You believed in yourself. That's all that matters." Arya sat in silence for a moment, her mind racing with possibilities. She had been given a second chance, and she would not waste it. She would return to her people, not as the princess they had exiled, but as the warrior she had become. She would show them the true strength she had always held within her. The fire crackled, casting a warm glow on their faces as the night stretched on. Arya felt a surge of determination rise within her, a fire that matched the one before her. She wasn't just going to reclaim her place in the world. She was going to change it. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Arya no longer feared it. Her heart pulsed with the energy of a warrior, a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The human had shown her what it meant to fight for herself, to believe in herself, and now, she was ready to face the world once again. The morning after their training, Arya stood at the edge of the forest, gazing out at the horizon. The human was beside her, his eyes scanning the distance. It was a new day, one full of possibilities, and Arya could feel the weight of the decision that lay before her. She had spent so many years running from her past, from the failure that had led to her exile. But now, the past was just that, a memory. She was no longer the frightened princess who had been cast aside. Where do we go now? Arya asked, her voice steady but full of curiosity. She had trained and grown stronger, but she had never faced what awaited her outside the forest. The world had changed since her exile, and she wasn't sure what to expect. Would her people accept her back? Or would they see her as the failure she had once been? The human turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "We go to your kingdom," he said simply. "It's time to reclaim what's yours." Arya felt a chill run down her spine at the mention of her kingdom. The memories of her failures flooded her mind, and for a moment, doubt crept into her heart. But the human's unwavering confidence in her gave her strength. He believed in her, and that belief was something she had never known before. Perhaps with his help, she could return to her people not just as their princess, but as their protector. "Do you think they'll accept me?" Arya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The thought of returning to a place where she had been rejected felt almost impossible, but she had to try, for her own sake. For her people. The human's smile was reassuring. "You're not the same person who left. You're stronger now, and you have something they need: your strength, your courage. Don't let the past define who you are now." His words resonated deep within her, sparking a fire of determination in her chest. Arya took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but she would face it head on. She wasn't just a princess. She was a warrior. The journey to her kingdom took several days. Along the way, Arya and the human encountered other travelers, some friendly, some suspicious of the alien princess traveling with a human. But each time, Arya's new confidence helped them pass without incident. She no longer hid in the shadows of her own self-doubt. Her posture was straight, her movements deliberate. The world had not defeated her, it had only made her stronger. On the fourth day, they reached the edge of the kingdom. Arya could see the familiar towering walls in the distance, the gates she had once passed through with pride, now close to her. Her heart raced as she approached. The memories of her fall from grace, of her exile, surged within her. She had been cast out, judged unworthy. Would they remember her as a failure? Would they accept her back? Or would they see her as nothing more than the weak princess she had once been? The human, noticing her hesitation, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've come this far," he said quietly. "This is your moment. You've already won half the battle by simply being here. You have nothing to fear." Arya nodded, drawing strength from his words. She wasn't the same person who had been exiled. She was a warrior now, and warriors didn't fear their past. She could fight for her place, for her people. She would show them that she was no longer the weak princess they had cast aside. She would prove that she had the strength to lead them. They approached the gates, and Arya could feel the weight of the moment settling in her chest. She had come so far, but this was where the true test would begin. The guards at the gate eyed her warily, their hands on their weapons, unsure of what to make of the alien princess. "I wish to speak with the leader of the kingdom," Arya said, her voice clear and unwavering. The words felt foreign on her tongue, but they were hers. She had no more fear. The guard exchanged a glance with his companion before nodding. "Wait here," he said as they waited. Arya's heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea what would happen next. But in that moment, she realized something. It didn't matter. She was no longer the princess who had failed. She was a warrior, and whatever came next, she would face it with the strength she had gained. A few minutes later, the gates creaked open, and a familiar face appeared before her, the king's advisor, a man she had once trusted, but who had turned against her when she failed. He eyed her cautiously, his expression unreadable. "Arya," he said, his voice cold. "What are you doing here?" Arya stood tall, meeting his gaze. "I've come to claim what is mine," she said firmly. "I've come to show you who I've become." The advisor raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. But there was something in her eyes of fire, a strength, that made him hesitate. Arya had always been more than just a princess. Now she was someone who had the power to change her destiny. The advisor's cold gaze lingered on Arya as the seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. The air around them seemed to grow thick with tension, and Arya could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was her chance. The moment that could define the rest of her life. She could not afford to falter. "You're not welcome here," the advisor said after a long silence, his voice filled with authority. "You were exiled for a reason, princess. You failed. Your weakness put us all in danger." Arya stood tall, her blue fur bristling slightly as her gaze remained locked on his. "I was not weak," she said, her voice calm but filled with quiet strength. "I was betrayed by those I trusted, and I failed because I was never given the chance to learn. I was never shown the right way." The advisor's lips tightened, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You still fail to understand," he said, his tone dismissive. "Your failure has cost us dearly. There is no place for someone like you here." Arya's heart tightened at his words, but she refused to let him see her doubt. She had heard these words before, back when she had been cast out. But she was no longer the same person who had been exiled. She was a warrior now, stronger than ever, and she would not let his words define her. "I'm not asking for a place here," she said, her voice unwavering. "I'm asking for the chance to prove myself. You say I failed, but you didn't see me. Now I've trained. I've grown. I'm not the same person who left this kingdom." The advisor's expression remained unreadable, but Arya could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. She had seen that look before, the look of someone who was unsure, someone who was beginning to question their own beliefs. Arya pressed on, her words coming faster now. "You don't have to accept me back as a princess, but you can give me the chance to show you that I can be more. I'm not weak anymore. I'm strong." The advisor's jaw clenched, and for a moment, Arya thought he might turn away. But then he spoke again, his voice quieter, though still tinged with skepticism. "And what do you think you can accomplish? You're just one person." Arya felt a surge of anger rise within her, but she kept it in check. "I am not just one person," she said firmly. "I am someone who has the strength to fight for what's right. I'm someone who can lead, who can protect, and who can change things. I am not just a failure. I am a warrior, and I will prove it to you." The advisor stood there, silent, weighing her words. Arya could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, but she refused to break. She was not here to beg for mercy. She was here to take back what was hers, to show them all the strength she had discovered within herself. After what felt like an eternity, the advisor nodded, though his expression remained cautious. "I'll take you to the council," he said. Reluctantly, "but don't think for a moment that you've won. You have a long way to go before you can regain any kind of standing here." Arya's heart raced with a mixture of fear and excitement. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. The council was the highest authority in the kingdom, and their decision would determine whether she could return to her rightful place or remain an outcast forever. As they made their way to the council chambers, Arya's mind raced. She had trained hard, and she had fought for every ounce of strength she had, but this was different. This was no longer about proving her worth to herself. This was about proving her worth to those who had once rejected her. Could she show them that she was not the same weak princess they had exiled? Could she convince them to see her as a warrior? The doors to the council chamber loomed before them, and Arya's heart pounded in her chest. She was ready. She had to be. This was her chance, and she would not let it slip away. The advisor pushed open the doors, and Arya stepped into the chamber, her eyes scanning the room. The council members sat at a long, high table, their eyes all turning to her as she entered. Some looked at her with disdain, while others regarded her with cold indifference. But Arya didn't flinch. She had been cast out, humiliated, and broken, but no more. Now, she was ready to face them all. "You've come back," the head counselor said, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and disdain. "What is it you want?" "Princess?" Arya straightened her back, her gaze steady. "I've come to show you that I am not the failure you think I am. I've come to prove that I have the strength to lead, to protect, and to fight for what's right. I am no longer the weak princess you exiled. I am a warrior, and I will prove it." There was silence in the room as the council members exchanged uncertain glances. Arya stood her ground, refusing to show any sign of weakness. This was her moment, and she would not let it slip away. The council chamber was deathly silent. Arya stood tall, facing the council members who had once been the rulers of her fate. The head counselor, an elderly alien with sharp features, looked down at her, his gaze cold and calculating. His voice, when he spoke, was sharp and dismissive. "You've made a bold claim, Princess," the head counselor said, his voice carrying authority. "But words are nothing. You say you have the strength to lead, to protect, to fight for what's right. Yet, you've already failed once. What makes you think you won't fail again?" Arya met his gaze without flinching. The doubt in his voice was clear, but it did not shake her resolve. She had come this far, and she would not let his words define her. "I have failed," she said calmly, her voice unwavering. "But I've learned. I've trained, I've fought, and I've grown stronger. I'm not the same person I was before. I won't let fear or doubt control me anymore." The council members exchanged glances, whispering among themselves. Arya could feel their eyes on her, judging her, measuring her. She knew they expected her to falter, to back down. But she had faced far worse than this. She had faced her own failure and risen from it. She would not let their judgment stop her now. The head counselor raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "And what makes you think the kingdom will accept you back? You were exiled because of your weakness. The people no longer trust you." Arya's heart tightened at the mention of her exile, but she held her ground. "The people can see strength when it's shown," she replied firmly. "I've seen what they need, what they desire. I will fight for them, not for myself, but for the future of this kingdom. I won't let the mistakes of the past define us." A murmur ran through the council as Arya spoke. Some of them seemed moved by her words, while others remained skeptical. The head counselor looked at her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing, as if trying to see through her words, find some flaw, some weakness to latch onto. But there was none. Arya was strong now. She had become the warrior she had always needed to be. "You claim to have grown stronger," the head counselor said. "Finally, but strength is not only measured by how well you fight. It's measured by your ability to lead, to inspire others. Show us that you can lead, that you can unite the people, and we will consider your plea." The challenge was clear. Arya had to prove herself not only as a warrior, but as a leader. This was her final test, the one that would determine whether she could truly reclaim her place. The council had already made up their minds, and now it was up to her to change them. "I will prove it," Arya said, her voice firm. "Give me the chance to lead, and I will show you that I have the strength to unite this kingdom. I will not be the princess you exiled. I will be the ruler they need." The council fell silent again, their eyes locked on her. Arya's heart pounded in her chest, but she did not falter. This was it. She was not here to beg for their approval. She was here to claim what was rightfully hers. She would fight for it, no matter what. The head counselor finally nodded, a small gesture, but one that carried weight. "Very well," he said. "We will give you one chance to prove yourself. But know this failure again will not be tolerated. The kingdom is at a crossroads. If you cannot lead, if you cannot inspire, then you will be exiled once more." Arya felt a surge of determination at his words. She had already faced her fears, had already risen from failure. There was no going back. She was ready to prove herself, to show them all that she had the strength to lead. "I will not fail," she said, her voice filled with resolve. The council members rose from their seats, signaling the end of the meeting. The head counselor gave her one last look, his expression a mixture of caution and curiosity. "We shall see," he said, before turning and leaving the chamber. Arya stood there, alone in the room, her heart racing with anticipation. The council had given her a chance to prove herself, to reclaim her kingdom and her place among her people. She had been exiled for being weak, for failing to protect her people, but now she was stronger than ever. She was ready to lead them, to fight for them, and to show them the true strength she had found within herself. Outside the chamber, the human stood waiting, his eyes filled with pride as he saw her emerge. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice filled with quiet hope. Arya smiled, a rare smile that reached her eyes. "I've been given a chance," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Now it's time to prove them all wrong." The human nodded, his gaze steady and supportive. "I know you will. You're stronger than you think, Arya. And now the world will see it too." Arya's heart swelled with gratitude, but she knew that her journey was far from over. This was just the beginning. She had a kingdom to reclaim, and she would not rest until she had earned the trust of her people and restored her rightful place among them. Arya stood before the kingdom, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. The council had given her a chance, a slim chance to prove herself as a leader. The people who had once turned their backs on her were now watching, waiting to see if she could truly live up to the promise she had made. It was a daunting task, but she was no longer the frightened princess who had been cast out. She was a warrior, and she would fight for what was rightfully hers. The streets of the kingdom were filled with people going about their daily business, unaware of the tension that hung in the air. Arya could feel their eyes on her, their gazes filled with curiosity and skepticism. She had once been their leader, but now she was an outsider, a stranger. The path ahead was unclear, but she would not let fear control her. She would show them her strength, her true strength, and she would lead them once again. The human, who had been her constant companion throughout this journey, stood beside her, his expression filled with quiet support. "You've come so far," he said softly, his voice full of pride. "Now it's time to show them who you really are." Arya nodded, taking a deep breath. She had trained, she had fought, and now it was time to act. She stepped forward, her eyes focused on the path ahead. The people around her began to notice, and a murmur spread through the crowd. Some looked at her with recognition, while others seemed confused, unsure of what to make of the alien princess who had returned after so long. She reached the center of the square, Where a group of city officials had gathered, they watched her. Silently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Arya's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood tall, refusing to show any sign of weakness. She was not here to beg for their approval. She was here to reclaim what was hers. "I've come to lead," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I've come to show you that I am no longer the princess you exiled. I am a warrior, and I will fight for you, for this kingdom. I will restore, honor, protect our people, and bring us back to the greatness we once knew." Her words echoed in the square, and for a moment, there was silence. The people were stunned, unsure of how to respond. Arya could see the doubt in their eyes, the hesitation. But she did not falter. She had faced her doubts before, and she would face them again now. "I was exiled because I was weak," Arya continued, her voice rising with determination. "But I have learned. I have fought and trained, and I have become stronger than ever. I will not let our kingdom fall. I will not let our people suffer. Together, we will rise again." As she spoke, she could feel the eyes of the crowd shifting. Some of them were nodding, others were whispering among themselves. Arya could see the seeds of doubt begin to crumble. She was not just speaking to them. She was speaking to herself as well. She had believed that she was weak, that she was unworthy of their trust. But now, she knew the truth. She was strong, and she had the power to lead them. The human stood behind her, his eyes filled with pride. He had believed in her from the beginning, and now it was time for the rest of the world to see what he had seen all along. Arya was no longer the princess they had exiled. She was a force to be reckoned with, a leader who had risen from the ashes of her past mistakes. Slowly, the murmurs in the crowd began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of awe. The people were starting to believe in her, to see the strength that she had discovered within herself. Arya's heart swelled with hope. This was what she had been fighting for, not just her own redemption, but the future of her people. She would lead them, and together, they would rebuild what had been broken. The head counselor appeared in the square, flanked by a few other council members. He looked at Arya, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Arya wondered if he would reject her, if he would try to cast her aside once more. But then, the counselor nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. "You have proven your strength," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Perhaps you are not the failure we once thought you were." The crowd's reaction was mixed, but the hesitation that had once filled the air began to dissipate. The people of the kingdom were starting to see her, not as the broken princess they had exiled, but as a leader who had fought to return and reclaim her place. The road ahead would not be easy, but Arya knew that she was ready. She had faced her past, and now she would shape the future. "I will not fail you," Arya said, her voice filled with conviction. "Together, we will restore our kingdom. We will rise above our failures and become stronger than ever before. I will lead us, and we will reclaim our place in the world." The crowd fell silent once again, but this time, there was no skepticism in the air. Arya could feel the weight of their expectations, but she no longer feared it. She had become the leader they needed, and she would not let them down. The silence that filled the square was unlike anything Arya had ever felt before. The people around her, once uncertain and skeptical, now watched her with a newfound respect. She had done it. She had proven herself to them, to the council, and most importantly, to herself. The path to reclaiming her place was still long, but Arya knew that this was the moment she had been fighting for. The head counselor, still standing at the front, regarded her carefully. His stern expression softened ever so slightly as he observed the crowd's reaction to her words. Arya's heart raced as she awaited his judgment. Would he stand by his earlier words, or would he acknowledge the strength she had shown? Finally, the head counselor spoke, his voice steady but filled with a weight that carried authority. "You have proven yourself today, Arya," he said, his gaze locking with hers. "You have shown that strength comes not from how we fall, but how we rise. You are no longer the failure we once thought you to be. The kingdom will follow you if you lead them with the same courage you've shown here today." The council members, who stood beside him, nodded in agreement, their cold, skeptical expressions slowly shifting to something more respectful. Arya's heart swelled with pride, but she didn't allow herself to become overwhelmed. This was only the beginning, and she had much to do. The people, who had been silent moments before, began to murmur among themselves. Their voices were soft at first, but the murmurs quickly grew louder as the realization spread. Arya was no longer an exile. She was a leader, and her strength had earned their trust. "I will lead you," Arya said, her voice rising once more, this time filled with the full weight of her conviction. "I will fight for you. I will rebuild what has been broken, and together we will make this kingdom stronger than it ever was before." The crowd erupted into applause. The sound filled the square, echoing through the streets, and for the first time in years, Arya felt a sense of belonging. She was no longer the princess cast aside by those who had once trusted her. She was their leader, their protector, and they had accepted her once more. The human, who had stood by her from the beginning, smiled at her from the side. His eyes were filled with pride, and for the first time, Arya saw the depth of his belief in her. He had never wavered, never doubted her potential. His unwavering support had been the spark that ignited the strength she now felt. "You did it," he said quietly, his voice filled with emotion. "I always knew you could." Arya smiled back at him, the weight of everything she had been through lifting off her shoulders. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the challenges would be many, but she was ready. She had become the warrior she had always dreamed of being, and now she would lead her kingdom with the same strength and courage. She had learned to trust in herself. The head counselor stepped forward, raising his hand to signal the end of the gathering. "The kingdom has spoken," he said, his voice carrying throughout the square. "Arya, you are now our leader. We will follow you, and together we will rise." The crowd cheered once more, and Arya felt a deep sense of pride swell within her. She had faced her doubts, her fears, and her past, and she had emerged victorious. She was no longer the princess who had failed. She was a warrior, and now she was the leader her people needed. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the kingdom. Arya turned to face the people she had once abandoned, and now they stood before her as her allies, her strength, and her future. She could feel the weight of their hopes and expectations, but this time she didn't fear it. She had faced the darkest parts of herself and had come out stronger on the other side. There was nothing left to fear. "Thank you," she whispered to the human by her side, her voice filled with gratitude. He had believed in her when no one else did. He had shown her that the strength she needed was always there, waiting to be found. He smiled at her, a simple gesture, but one that spoke volumes. "You did all the hard work, Arya. I'm just glad I could help." Arya turned back to the crowd, her eyes steady, her voice strong. "Together we will rebuild. We will not be defined by our past. We will forge a new future, one where strength and unity lead us to greatness." As the crowd cheered, Arya felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had finally found her place. She was no longer defined by failure, but by the strength she had. Built with her own hands, she was not just a princess. She was a leader, and this was only the beginning of her journey.